Well, this is the story of Wendaben, as my father told it to me, and as my father heard it from Tom Potts one time, head of the band at Bear Island. Wendaben was a young man of solitary habits who lived on the west shore of Lady Evelyn Lake many years ago, where his ancestral trapping rights were. And he rarely visited the Bear Island community, where the Indian band was mostly concentrated. But once in a while he came in for supplies, and found one, and the marriage was considered suitable, and in the fullness of time they were married, and the chief's daughter accompanied Wendaben back by dog sled to his winter camp on the west shore of Lady Evelyn Lake. And he could not become accustomed to having someone else around. He held to his solitary ways of thinking and behaving, and it was not very long before she began to miss the bright lights of Bear Island. And
Don't blame her
and the
one
crowds
bit.
and the girlfriends, the boyfriends.
Her mama and her papa.
And her mama, her mommy and her daddy. And the more fretful she became, the more withdrawn her husband became. And it drove her out of her gourd. And finally one night, in the winter darkness, she got out of from under the skins they slept under and crept over to the wood stove and seized the axe which rested beside the stove, and she came back and she split Wendaben's skull wide open in the dark night. Harnessed the dogs, got on his snowshoes, and drove back to Bear Island. And back in those days, law was a simpler thing, and nobody asked any questions, and she rejoined, picked up her life where it left off. And that is the story of Wendaben, as it was told by Tom Potts, by descent, an Indian chieftain, to my father, who told it to me. However, going back to the 1930s, on the island in Temagami and Sharp Rock Inlet, on the way to Sharp Rock Inlet and the Diamond Lake Portage leading to Lady Evelyn, lived a woman named Miss Deering, who was a school teacher in the Cleveland school system. And she'd been there for many years on that island and was by herself all summer. And one night, very late in summer, pretty well into September, during one of the periods we have of heavy winds, and of course the darkness comes a good deal earlier by then than it does in high summer. My mother woke in the middle of the night and said to my father, Brooks, I hear someone. And Brooks said, go back to sleep. It's your imagination. And she said, no, it's not my imagination. I hear something. I hear someone. Listen. And the wind made a lot of noise, and the waves made a lot of noise. But nonetheless, Father began to listen to, and sure enough, they could hear a woman crying in the night. And they got out of bed, they got the flashlights, they got the barn lanterns lit, and they went, and there, off the east shore of the island, where the high rock is, they could see a woman alone in a canoe, paddling south. And they waved the lanterns and it dragged her ashore. You know where Coffee Rock is? Just down below the cabin? Main cabin? That nice place down by the water there, where the hose is for the pump. You know where that is?
Yeah, I know where
Sure, you know
that
where it is. Yeah. It was right down there that she came ashore, and it was Miss Deering who had paddled down all alone from her island in Sharp Rock in the middle of the dark night.
100 miles?
And she said,
What?
and she was a thoroughly reasonable, matter-of-fact person. And she said that she was absolutely terrified. She said that she had seen an Indian at her window. Now this was many, many years after Indians traveled these lands in their native costume and in their native ways and in their native hairstyles and feathers and all the ways the American Indian used to be, remember? So, remember? Yeah. And she said, I'm not just imagining this. I saw an Indian looking in the window of my cabin. And he was crying and sobbing. And I am terrified and I don't know what to make of it. Well, my mother and father brought her in and made hot cocoa and warmed her up by the fire and put her to bed, not in this cabin, but in one of the tent floors for the night, and tucked her up nice and warm. But when morning came and she had a good breakfast, she said, it must have been my imagination. I don't know what came over me. And she went away. But my father said, well, do you know the story of Wendaben? And she said, yes, I do. And that was the first thing I thought of. Do you suppose it's possible that, you know?
That was not.
Well, they didn't come right out and say it, but that was what was in everybody's mind. And it's happened before up around Sharp Rock Inlet and the east end of Diamond Lake and the south end of Lady
Is
Evans.
it a true
That people hear, campers hear noises in the night. And many of the Indians don't like to go there. And last summer, when Alex Mattias and I became friends, I told him that story. is a descendant of Tom. Descendant? Alex is descendant. His father's father's father
Okay.
was Tom Potts, who told the Indian who told my father that story when they were both young men. So I told Alex
Red light
this
on.
story of Wendaben, and Alex said, "You know, I never heard that." And when I saw Alex, when I first saw him this summer, we met at Boatline Bay. Alex came in for gasoline. And Alex said, "Do you know that story you told me about Wendaben?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know, I thought it was some kind of fairy story you were telling. But this summer, when the band is camping up at Sharp Rock to stop the government from building a log road, they chose a name for their camp, and the name of the camp was Wendaben. And I asked Gary Potts, who's the chief today of the Bear Island Band, I asked him where that name came from. And Gary Potts told me the same story you told me last summer. That Wendaben is the name of their camp.
I didn't tell you that.
No,
story.
I am quoting. You didn't tell me. But Alex said to me, Jack, he said, Gary Potts told me the same story that you told me last summer about Wendaben, and I never heard it before. And to think that I should hear it first from a Shaganash.
What's the Shagana?
That's what Indians call white men for joke.
Is that a true story?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, it is a true story.